Good morning, everyone, and welcome to LACONI Technology Section's presentation of the Digital Shred Workshop. I am Katie Rose McNeely. I'm the Electronic Resources Librarian at Rosalind Franklin University, Medicine and Science. And let me just go into a little bit of housekeeping before we get started with the presentation. This is a webinar presentation, so you can either submit questions to us using the chat or the Q&A function. Please feel free to do so. We're very excited to answer any questions you might have. There's going to be one poll in this session, just a quick true false. So your response is anonymous. It just helps us kind of move the conversation along. This webinar is being recorded. When we get to the discussion portion where we want to talk about strategies that we can put into place at our own libraries, I will turn off the recording so that we can talk a little bit more freely and feel more comfortable, since the recording will be posted to the LACONI YouTube channel afterwards. We will also make the slides available to this presentation so that if you have additional questions or if you want to see some of the resources that we use to repurpose this workshop, you are more than welcome to do so. With that, it looks like we're just getting to the top of the hour, so I will introduce myself and I will pass the baton on to my co-presenters and we'll get started. So as I said at the beginning of this, I'm Katie Rose McNeely. I'm the Electronic Resources Librarian at Rosalind Franklin University of Medicine and Science. Before I held this position, I was a technology librarian at a public library. So managing digital privacy is really important to me. If you're not familiar with LACONI, we are an organization in Northern Illinois that seeks to help educate and develop library workers. And we'll have a link to the LACONI website at the end of the presentation. I'm going to hand off the mic to my co-presenter, Holly, who will introduce herself, and then we will get into the meat of this presentation. Thank you all for coming.
Hi, everyone. My name is Holly, and right now I am the Teen Outreach and Programming Librarian at the Algonquin Area Public Library District, and that's in like the northwest suburbs of Chicago, kind of in between Rockford and Chicago. But then also by night, I write for the ALA Office of Intellectual Freedom blog. And I used to be part of the ALA's Intellectual Freedom Committee from 2019 to 2021. So intellectual freedom and privacy has always kind of been a passion of mine. I think that's all about me as for now. Roseanne, did you want to introduce yourself too before we get started?
Sure. My name is Roseanne Vanish. I'm the Electronic Resources Librarian at the Winfield Public Library, a very small library west of Wheaton, Illinois. Thank you.
Okay, so today we're doing the Digital Shred Workshop, and just a disclaimer before we get started, this program is adapted and remixed from the Digital Shred Workshop created by Alex Chisholm and Sarah Hartman Cavalry at Penn State University's Thune Library. The program is covered by a Creative Commons BY-NC SA 4.0 Creative Commons license that allows us to adapt their materials and share it with others, so long as we give credit and do not use it for commercial purposes. LACONI Technology Section is presenting this workshop to help library workers learn more about managing their own digital privacy and share that knowledge with patrons, friends, and colleagues. So what are we doing today? We're going to learn a bit more about digital privacy so that we can make informed choices about our online presence and identity. We'll also be learning about more practical tools to help you, your patrons, your friends, and your family with their digital privacy and digital footprint.
And here is where we have a little poll. So I'm just going to launch this poll. I'm going to give everyone about 20 seconds to go ahead and answer it. It's completely optional, but your participation just helps move us right along.
Sorry, my cat is in my room if you hear him yelling at me.
I'm just hoping I don't get a nephew running into my office.
Okay.
I have a lot of those. All right, looks like most participants have responded, so I'm going to end the poll and let's take a look at the results. So I think that we've self-selected a really great audience because it looks like for the most part, you all are understanding the importance of these questions. So our first question, I have nothing to hide, so it doesn't matter, is false, because even if you have nothing to hide, your information is still valuable and it can be used to advertise directly to you, and it can be used to manipulate you. It's part of the whole right to privacy that we think is so important in libraries. And as for question 2, Google doesn't own everything. It does own a lot of things. And it does mine your data for commercial purposes. So if you've seen ads in your search results, if you've seen ads, if you use Gmail, those are some areas where that information is collected or you're marketed to. And there are things that you can do to help limit what Google can do with your data. It's sort of similar to limiting the information that credit bureaus can share about you if you maybe have a student loan or a credit card, but you know, every little bit helps. And last but not least, I don't use that old account anymore, so it's probably fine. That's what we call a zombie account. And we'll talk about those a little bit more later in the presentation, but you should take control of your old data just the same way that you keep track of your house keys or your garage door code. So let's move on. So what is a digital shred? And a digital shred is the act of managing your privacy by curating your digital records for purposes of data governance, risk management, and storage efficacy. And that's a really academic way of saying that you can manage your digital records or get rid of digital records in a way that is going to help clean up after yourself and create secure data habits, because you want to control as much of your personal information as possible. In academic context, digital shred drive applies to data governance and storage efficiency, as we mentioned. And so an example of this is using a password manager with a secure password or two-factor authentication. And I know that in libraries, especially public libraries, two-factor authentication is not always the answer. Or just not putting your password on a Post-it note attached to your monitor. So these are some ways that we can start talking about how to control your data and how to control how you store your data so that you are more protected. Essentially, we want to keep you from becoming a prisoner of your data double. So data doubles are modeled data, and this is the result of all the information that is collected about you from information that you've given freely, like, yes, I consent to share my Facebook friend list with this app so that I can play Farmville, or data that's monitored automatically. So your metadata, the data about your search results, the data about what kinds of mailing lists that you've signed up for that then may be sold to other companies, and also algorithms and artificial intelligence. I wouldn't worry too much about artificial intelligence just yet, despite what the Google Medium post says about it becoming sentient. I don't think we're quite there yet. It's still recommending eggplant instead of watermelon in the grocery cart substitution list. So it's got a ways to go. But this model data can be used to affect like how attractive you're considered in a dating app, or how trustworthy you are when your employer is doing a background check. And it can affect your real life opportunities and experiences. A lot of this information is covered in more detail in the privacy workshop, which is available from the same people who created the digital shred workshop. We'll provide links to that, but essentially your data double is that sneaky shadow behind you that is the trail of everything that you've ever done digitally. And we're going to find ways to make it so that you have a little more control. So one way that you can practice data governance is to develop a burner account. And this is more than just like a non-trackable cell phone that you use when you're talking to your friends in the spy industry. Um, it is an account that you can use for just certain activities so that your information can't be mined as easily. And Holly is very kindly going to put a link in the chat that takes you to the Digital Shred Workshop Guide from Penn State Libraries. And it's going to have a link to a worksheet there that's going to help you build out a little scenario like, oh, what information would I want to not have associated with my real life? And how would I use that? Is this for your Disney Plus login that you definitely aren't sharing with another friend? Or is this for a rewards program that you're signing up for? You know, what are some ways that you can kind of compartmentalize that information about you? So that worksheet is something that you can fill out and kind of get yourself thinking about it.
The first link is directly to the worksheet, and then the second link I posted is to the LibGuide for the whole program. Do we want to go through the worksheet at all, Katie Rose?
Yeah, why don't we? And let's see, do you want to go ahead and share that? Can you do that or shall I?
Oh, share my screen type thing. Yeah. Sure. All right. So it's an editable PDF. If you clicked on the first link, that will take you directly to this, the ideal portfolio worksheet. So you can write it down or you can type it out in here. But it's just kind of a worksheet for if you are creating the perfect account or a fake burner account to do some private research on your crush. What would you choose to make it the perfect account? From your username to the posted content, what would you consider ideal? So it kind of first goes into stuff about your username, your bio, and then what phone number and email is associated with the account. So if someone were to dox you, would they have your private information right away? Or do you have it set that you are notified or contacted if someone logged in for you? I know on Google, it's like the Google security alert. And like we were saying before, like everything is kind of valuable to these companies. So even just your types of interactions, what you share, like, and say, or who you're following and who's following you, and even the time and place of your interactions. So when do you post? How often do you post? Are you sharing the data location when you post? Where are you posting? So I think this is just kind of a good way to get all your thoughts into place about your portfolio. And it could be thinking about where you have risk now on your regular portfolios, or like the worksheet says, if you're creating a perfect account or for research, something like that. Stop sharing there. And go back to the slides. All right, awesome. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is called the Digital Shred Damage Assessment. And there's another worksheet associated with that. It is just page 2 on that link that you already should have. It was the same document as the ideal portfolio and the same PDF. It's page 2. So that is adapted from the Intelligence Community Directive 732. And if anyone wants the link to that, I suppose I could post it. It is very detailed legalese though. Let me just pull that up real quick. Oh, they don't have it linked. So sad. Maybe I'll link it to you in a second. But anyways, so they're just looking to evaluate actual or potential damage resulting from an infiltration or exfiltration. So that's more like scary legalese language for like a government, infiltration like that. But that could happen to people too. It's, we call it more like doxing, not like infiltrations, but it's the same type of thing. So we're also looking to identify systematic vulnerabilities and develop a corrective action plan. So I guess I will go in to share my screen again. So you can see the worksheet here. Oof, I am on the wrong tab. Here we wrong one. Wrong
It's
one.
not a technology presentation until we look it
Until we
down,
have
right?
technology problems, yeah. So this worksheet just kind of takes you through it as if your personal accounts were infiltrated by a hostile intelligence asset, or maybe just your kid sister, who exfiltrated sensitive information about you. So use this framework adapted from, like we said, Intelligence Community Directive 732 damage assessments to identify your risks and plan corrective actions. So this is kind of like more preventative, looking kind of in the future, I guess, for, if this happens to you. So identify any risky digital behaviors you might engage in. So that sounds very official, but I'm sure we all do a lot of these things, like storing passwords in your browser. I know I do that sometimes. Phone, your phone isn't password protected. Someone can just open it. It's not locked or anything like that. Public social media posts, sensitive browsing, anything like that. And evaluating the impact of the information disclosure. So what sensitive data do you generate? And that a lot of that does come from like social media posts or browsing history and shopping history, like on Amazon and stuff like that. All those websites and stuff, they kind of work together. They talk to each other to create like a profile about you, how to advertise to you, how to manipulate you. And estimate the damages that could happen if there was a data breach. What are some worst case scenario consequences of your data breach? Could you get fired? Could you lose your scholarship? Would it just hurt other people's feelings, which is still really serious? Break up your relationship, stuff like that. And assess your risks. What is the likelihood of a data breach occurring? And that's, I think, where the ideal portfolio can come in handy to that worksheet, identifying the likelihood of that happening. Consider ranking your accounts or activities from most to least vulnerable. So Twitter could be a high risk because if you have your password stored in your browser. But if you have two-factor authentication enabled, not having your password stored in your browser, that might make it a little less vulnerable. And plan corrective action. What could you do differently in the future to manage risky digital behaviors or repair damages? So like setting your social media to private instead of public, deleting old content, and like we talked about earlier, deactivating zombie accounts, old accounts, email addresses you don't use anymore. Or you could just be a kinder human. It's kind of funny down there. But if anyone wants to get going working on this or just thinking about it, it is again an editable PDF. So you can just type in there yourself or just think about it, write it down, or save it. I think it's good to have, even if you're doing like a library program, to be honest, for the public, for your patrons. So I think that is about it for the digital shred damage assessment. I will stop sharing my screen.
Had to find my unmute button. Yeah, and I will also mention too that sometimes there are things that happen where information is scraped or taken without your consent. There's nothing you could have done about it. For instance, I think we all remember the Equifax breach that happened a couple of years ago and how that has cast a really long shadow, and Equifax has been required to provide additional credit monitoring for people who were affected. So sometimes the best kind of damage assessment that you have is just maintaining an awareness of large breaches that have occurred and using some tools that we are going to share with you to see if you have been affected by them. So let's go on to the next slide and talk about that. Part of that is the personal data integrity plan. So to get shredding, there are some resources that are mentioned in the guide. We're not going to share all of the resources mentioned in the guide from the original Digital Shred Workshop, because to do so would just be an enormous wall of text. But there are some really great resources that we can use to see if your account has been hacked, to see if you need to create a Google alert for yourself, or to see if a password that you've used previously has been exposed in a data breach. There is also a resource listed on this page, Blacklight, that will tell you what kind of user tracking technology is on a website and who is getting your data. And there are browser extensions that you can add to your computer that will help protect you. Of course, if you've ever used one of those extensions, I'm sure that you've had the experience of going to a news site that says, it looks like you're protecting your data, and that's not how we make money. Don't you want us to make money? And then you can either say, oh, I'll let you make money, or I'll do it next time. But some places don't let you access their content without giving them your data to begin with. It's a real challenge. But so have I been found? It's computer world terminology to basically say, like, has my information been stolen? Is it going to be shared with others? The whole doxing question. And that will let you know if your accounts have been compromised in a data breach. So essentially what you do is you enter in an email address and it says like, oh, this is associated with the, a big scrape of Tumblr accounts, and your account may have been compromised. So you should go in and change your password, or just double check that none of your information has been leaked. And part of this too is going to be about zombie accounts. So I know we talked about that a little bit earlier. Well, let's take a look at what should be gotten rid of. So that can be marketing newsletters or contests that you've entered and given your email address away. You can go ahead and unsubscribe from those. And then for a while there was a really popular Google add-on called Unroll Me. But in order to make it work, you had to give it permission to read all of your emails, which was kind of a Sophie's choice. There are, of course, the zombie accounts. A really good resource for getting rid of old accounts that you don't use anymore is called Just Delete Me. So it's justdelete.me. And it basically is a directory of all of the information that you need to delete a zombie account, and how easy it is or how hard it is. Some places it's impossible to delete, and some places it's just a lot of hoops. So you can also, again, listed in that LibGuide are other resources like how to find your old accounts and specific steps that you can take. So as you can see, there's a lot of information that it just doesn't occur to us to delete, because the terms and conditions are meant to be really overwhelming, and they're not meant to protect us. They're meant to protect the organization that has created the resource. And that brings us to privacy field guides, which is a really great resource for libraries and library workers. And I will let Holly explain it in more detail.
All right, yeah, so the privacy field guides, this is something that recently came out. It was developed by a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services in partnership with the American Library Association to create the new privacy field guides. They were created, I believe, by a couple librarians from Alameda County Library District. Some big privacy librarians in the field. And these guides contain practical hands-on exercises for you to create a more privacy-focused library. They are designed for libraries of all types, and there are two versions, I guess. So let me just give you the links. So the first one is it's more of like an interactive website, not printable, not a PDF, nothing like that. But you can kind of go through all their different guides online, and it is not just technology based. I know a lot of these like types of digital shred, it's all focused on like the technology and digital, but they also have a non-technology privacy field guide too, just in case, maybe you're not totally technology adapt. And then let me just drop a link to the PDF website so you can download PDFs of it. I have them all printed up here at home. But they were developed recently. It started off as kind of like we were talking about in the Intellectual Freedom Committee, like how do we reach library workers around the country with privacy, because it is a high-tech thing a lot of the time. We started thinking about like maybe we could develop checklists, but they eventually ended up getting a grant to develop these really nice looking privacy field guides. So definitely check those out.
And in addition to that, one really great way to start taking control of your information is to use strong passwords. And this XKCD comic is pretty well known in the world now for showing how challenging it is, because a lot of strong passwords are made so that it's really, really hard for people to remember them, which is why we make our browser save it, or why we write it on a Post-it note and stick it on our computer monitor. And weirdly, they're really easy for computers to figure them out. So a number of years ago, Randall Munroe, the creator of XKCD, created this comic saying, you know, it's really easy for a human to remember a bunch of random words. It's really hard for a computer to remember it. Why don't we have passwords that are created like this? It's actually become so successful that correct horse battery staple, the example used in the comic, is now considered an unacceptable password for a lot of resources. If you try to use it as your password for Dropbox, for instance, they're like, that's too common of a password. That can't be used. It's right up there with password. But one way around this is to use a password manager, and this can help keep control of information in a way that doesn't necessarily require having your browser remember it. There are browser add-ons and there are apps that you can install on your phone that will help protect your data while using these password managers, and it does make your life easier. Some really common ones are Bitwarden, which has a really robust free version. Another one is LastPass. The free version of that is less robust. It only allows you to use it on a computer or a phone. If you have the paid version, it allows you to use it across numerous devices, which is really helpful. There's also 1Password, and essentially these are resources that once you create a really strong password that you have to know to log into it, it can generate secure passwords, and it can also keep track of whether or not your password is considered weak or if it has been compromised. So like I said, these all have free versions. They're really helpful for library workers in that you can create organizational versions of it so that you aren't just using the same 2 passwords for all of your organization's accounts, because you have so many people logging into the different accounts that it's just easier that way. And there is a way to turn on 2-factor authentication. I personally don't love 2-factor authentication, especially for shared accounts, because if someone leaves an organization, it makes it really hard if all of the reset alerts are going to the phone of someone who has already left. I know as an electronic resources librarian, 2-factor authentication is required for getting reports from a lot of vendors. And so one thing that we've had to do is make it all go to a specific email account. But then some vendors say, oh, we can't send 2-factor authentication information to a specific email account that's checked by multiple people, even if it's a delegated email. So, you know, it's a continuous process, essentially, is what I'm saying. So, but that's one really great first step to make. And setting up the password manager can take a little while, but once you do, it makes life a lot easier. So I am going to pause our recording and let's go ahead and start having a little bit of a conversation. We can make it possible for you to use your microphone if you prefer to use that instead of chat, but we're going to pause the recording so that you can feel a little bit more free to talk about the things that work or don't work for you and things that maybe you can take to your library. So now that we've gone through our discussion portion, let's go on to our final slide, which is a big thank you for attending this program. Again, we are the LACONI Technology Section. Our website is www.laconi.net/technology. There you can find information on our board, on our mission, and all of the people who are currently involved, as well as information on our past programs. Additionally, I have a link to our YouTube channel where previous programs are posted. That's one of the great side benefits of COVID, is that we have been able to record and preserve a lot more of our programs than we used to. So you will find not just programs from the technology section, but also programs for youth services, programs for the other sections of LACONI. While it is geared towards Northern Illinois libraries, I think that a lot of this information is available to libraries all over the United States. I would say Canada, but laws and regulations differ. So some of it is just sort of general ideas. And then Roseanne wants me to remind all of you that we are always looking for new board members or new program ideas. If you want to get involved, we would absolutely love to have you on board. I know that LACONI tends to do 3 or 4 programs per year. People take turns or join on teams. And I know it's been a really valuable experience for me as a public librarian and as an academic librarian. So thank you all for attending. And we look forward to seeing some of you at a future LACONI event, or maybe joining the LACONI in the future. So thank you